Today, we're flying 12 hours in the Turkish Airlines A350 back to Denver, but we're also going to dive into the fascinating history of Turkish Airlines. Believe it or not, they weren't always the global powerhouse they are today. They've suffered through many years of financial losses, regional conflicts, recessions, ownership changes, and a string of brutal crashes in the 70s and 80s that almost ruined their reputation for good. But our story begins back in 1933, just 10 years after the foundation of the Republic. Mustafa Ataturk, Turkey's first president, was a former brigadier general in the Ottoman army and witnessed firsthand the power of aviation in World War I. Ataturk believed, and I quote, "The future is in the skies. Nations that cannot protect their skies can never be sure of their future." So while building up the Turkish Air Force was his utmost priority, he also wanted Turkey to be a leader and pioneer in civil aviation. So Turkish Airlines was born, except back then it wasn't called that. It was called Devlet Hava Yolları, or literally State Airlines. But we can call them DHY for now. DHY started with a budget of 180,000 lira, which is probably a pretty handsome sum of money at the time, and that was enough to run a fleet of 5 planes, a hodgepodge mix of American, German, and Soviet aircraft, 2 Junkers F-13s, 2 Curtiss Kingbirds, and 1 Tupolev AN-T-9. The Junkers and Curtiss planes could seat no more than 5 people, and the Tupolev seated 10. The airline flew exclusively domestic routes until 1947, when Athens was added to the route map, followed by Cyprus, Beirut, Cairo, and Rome. This international expansion nearly doubled DHY's passenger numbers in just a year, and it coincided with Turkey's transition to more of an open, liberal economy in the 1950s. DHY was renamed to THY in 1956, so it was now Türk Hava Yolları, which translates to Turkish Airlines, and they continued to attract new customers with the promise of speed and safety. I do think it's worth mentioning at this point that over its first 26 years in business, THY had a perfect safety record, literally 0 crashes, though that changed in 1959. The next decade or so was still mostly sunshine and roses for the young carrier. They joined IATA, they partnered with the Brits, and they expanded their fleet, adding Vickers Viscounts, Fokker F-27s, and Douglas DC-3s. THY started flying their first jets in 1967, starting with the DC-9, then later added the 707, the DC-10, and the Fokker F-28. These planes of course enabled the carrier to reach new international markets, and by 1970, THY had expanded their European network to 10 destinations and was flying over 1 million people per year. With new international markets came increased competition, and the airline worked diligently on marketing campaigns targeting everyone from foreign tourists to migrant workers to Hajj pilgrims. The last thing they needed was an accident, but sadly that's exactly what happened. In 1974, a Turkish DC-10 went down just north of Paris, killing all 346 people on board. At the time, it was the deadliest plane crash in aviation history, and it remains the deadliest single aircraft accident without survivors. Over the next decade, the airline would suffer 4 more fatal crashes and developed a reputation for delays and poor service. The fleet was aging, but inflation in Turkey was through the roof, which made it near impossible for the carrier to raise money to buy new aircraft. To make matters worse, there was a military coup in 1980 that crushed demand for air travel to Turkey. However, the new government, led by Prime Minister Turgut Özal, was a big advocate for THY and wanted to build it into a big global brand that the Turkish people would be proud of. As such, they started an ambitious fleet renewal program that would drive down the age of the fleet to 6.2 years by 1993. Under the direction of new CEO Cem Kozlu, Turkish tried to operate more like a business than the government bureaucracy, investing in its employees, its systems, and the customer experience, while also exploring partnerships with foreign carriers to expand the flight network. More intercontinental routes were launched, and the company leaned on Turkish hospitality as a differentiator in an increasingly competitive European market. Despite THY's efforts, the 90s were a bit of a roller coaster ride, mostly due to regional conflicts, notably the Gulf War and Kosovo War, and the resulting impacts on travel demand, fuel costs, and insurance costs. Privatization of the carrier started in 1990 and would continue for the next several decades, with the government steadily reducing its stake in the airline. Today, a majority of the shares are publicly traded, meaning the airline is technically a private company. Over the last 2 decades, the company has really transformed. They more than quadrupled their fleet while increasing passenger numbers almost 7-fold. The route network is 3 times the size it was in 2004, and their entry into Star Alliance has enabled them to expand their reach even further, offering customers a pretty impressive menu of 535 international destinations. They've diversified their business, adding new passenger brands to the portfolio, scaling up their technical services operation, their cargo operation, and more. And yes, they've certainly got some help from their government, including a new $12 billion Istanbul airport. But I think the government did their research. Turkey, now Türkiye, is one of the fastest growing aviation markets in the world, meaning that more and more Turkish citizens are flying every year, creating a sort of compounding effect with the airline's already strong international connecting passenger flow. So hopefully by this point you're quasi-intrigued by the Turkish Airlines story, enough so to join me for a long-haul flight in their A350 business class. If not, well, no hard feelings, but at least let me know in the comments what airline you are intrigued by, so maybe I can cover them in the future. Welcome to Istanbul Airport on a picture-perfect day in late October. It's Republic Day, and the festive vibes are palpable, both on the outside and inside of the terminal.
It's a beautiful Tuesday, Republic Day, national holiday, but that isn't stopping the hustle and bustle here. Oh God, our Uber driver just like honked or something. Heading inside now, door 4, international check-in for our flight to Denver at 2:30. So let's do it.
Now, all the sirens you're hearing seem to be more of celebratory sirens, as there certainly weren't any emergencies I was aware of.
We got this place all dressed up for Republic Day. Got some massive flags, got pictures of the man himself, Ataturk, and Erdogan, of course.
Once inside, we had to clear an initial security check before proceeding to bag drop. We don't have this in the US, but it seems to be fairly common in airports in the Middle East and Africa, and I'm not surprised to have it here given the attacks back in 2016.
Alright, cleared security check number 1. Now just headed over to the check-in desk / bag drop. It is exactly 12 noon. Flight is at 2:30, so hopefully it's a pretty quick bag drop process here at the business class check-in, and then we'll get on our way. Hopefully to check out this lounge I've heard really good things about. Should be one of the best in the world. So
the next stop is check-in area L.
Marhaba, hello.
Business class?
Yes. Okay, thank you.
I'm a firm believer that the ground experience can make or break a business class product, so it was good to see Turkish invest in a more upscale, exclusive feeling area for its premium cabin. This place felt more like a luxury hotel than an airport, with upscale fixtures and furnishings, a dedicated seating area, and hotel-style bellman carts. Now you can make the place look as luxurious as you want, but it means nothing unless you also have the people to bring it to life. A good attitude goes a long way, as they say.
Merhaba.
Marhaba.
Where are you going to? Denver?
We were traveling together, but I think it's 2 separate reservations.
Is there any electronic device like power bank, laptop?
No.
Do you know where the launch is, business launch?
We don't, but we'll probably be able to find it.
Okay. After passport control, turn right side, opposite E1 gate.
Exit. Okay. Thank you very much.
Have a nice flight.
All right, touch the quarter. Thank you. All right, it's now about 12:20, which means the check-in or the bag drop process took like 15-ish, 20 minutes. So, I mean, we got plenty of time, but just probably a heads up for anyone that's traveling internationally, long distance, long haul on Turkish. It's not, you know, we probably had 8 or 9 people in front of us in line. They were all checking like 3 or 4 bags, so it wasn't the fastest / most efficient security process, but everyone was super nice and great service so far, and headed to the fast track.
I think the reality is you sort of have to balance speed and service. When we traveled Turkish domestically in economy, the bag drop experience is way quicker, but all the kiosks were automated, so it felt very impersonal. But anyways, back to fast track, which was fast, as advertised.
All right, whatever time we lost it, bag drop, we just made up with security here. That was a breeze, love to see it. And didn't have to take any of the laptops outside of the bag, which does save a lot of time, so must mean they have some pretty advanced security scanners here in IST.
Security is just one of the many areas IST is streamlining with technology. They've also got one of the most advanced baggage handling systems in the world. While you're enjoying a samit in the lounge, your bag is embarking on an adventure of its own, twisting and turning through 26 miles of conveyor belts and 500 individual scanners en route to one of IST's 5 concourses. The system is capable of handling 20,000 bags per hour. By comparison, Heathrow's Terminal 5 baggage system, once state-of-the-art when it opened in 2008, is capable of handling 12,000 bags per hour. Anyways, back to the concourse where our next order of business is finding Turkish's 60,000 square foot flagship lounge.
Okay. Teşekkür ederim.
We made our way up the escalator and then scanned in using our boarding passes.
You check in at the desk or here? Okay. Yep.
Upon entering, we were greeted with a massive display featuring, of course, the Turkish flag. Most of the lounge, including the buffet and most of the seating, is to the right, whereas the showers, bag storage, and sleep suites are off to the left. There were more food stations than I could count, and much of it was an open kitchen concept where you could see them prepping the breads, the pizzas, the pastries, and more. It was hard not to just jump at the first station I saw, but I somehow held it together until I reached the back, where they were serving up some spicy chili chicken with rice.
Hi, sir.
Hello. Can I just do a little bit of the chicken and rice, please?
Okay. Have a nice flight.
Teşekkür ederim.
Afiyet olsun.
Thank you.
Along with the chicken, I went for some lentil soup and an assortment of salads, which looked and tasted amazing. My only real complaints at this point were the following. First, the lounge was extremely crowded, probably near its capacity of 1,000 guests if I had to guess. It didn't bother me too much since I was really only looking to get a quick bite and head out. If I was looking to set up shop in one of the quieter areas away from the buffet, it would have been pretty difficult. And second, the temperature was uncomfortably hot, which is probably more of an Istanbul airport problem than the Turkish Airlines problem. But still, you'd think there's something they could do about it. Luckily, there were plenty of cold drink options to reduce my body temperature, including water, an assortment of Turkish sodas, and of course, Ayran. I grabbed a soda water and headed over to the golf simulator because why not?
How far did you go? 118? Nice.
Yeah, I think we.
Teşekkür ederim.
Rica ederim.
This place also has a flight simulator named after the famous Ottoman scholar Hazarfen Çelebi, who's rumored to have been the first human to fly using a pair of man-made wings. The story goes that he flew from the Galata Tower over the Bosphorus to Üsküdar, about 3.5 kilometers away. The simulator was in use when I stopped by, but I was jealous of this dude who was probably soaring effortlessly over Istanbul's most famous landmarks. And last stop before we leave, I promise, is this sort of Turkish Airlines museum, which showcases the history of TK from the mail-carrying DHY days all the way up until today. I personally enjoyed this section very much, but it otherwise wasn't getting much love. Around 1:30, we started our long trek over to gate A11, which is the furthest gate in the A pier. Unless you're flying out of gates C1 to C4 or E1 to E4, you're probably going to have to at least a 10-minute walk to your gate, so keep that in mind. Upon arrival at gate Alpha 11, we had to go through about 3 more document checks before finally being cleared into the gate area.
Alright, after like literally 3 or 4 passport checks, we're in the holding area now. I think they're already boarding, so let's get on board.
But first, a quick moment of appreciation for our chariot over to Denver. An almost 3-year-old Airbus A350-900 equipped with the standard Turkish interiors, so no special Aeroflot cabin this time around. This particular aircraft had been on the ground in Istanbul for over 24 hours, having operated TK-180 from Los Angeles one day prior.
Hello. Teşekkür ederim.
Rica ederim.
You finally figure out the language the second we leave.
Not gonna lie, both my mom and I struggled to learn Turkish while we were there. But by the time we had left, we at least had Merhaba, Nasılsın, and Teşekkür ederim somewhat figured out. Now, right here, as we're boarding, we see the so-called in-flight chef. I don't know how having someone dressed as a chef could possibly detract from the overall experience, yet somehow the internet has found a way to chastise these people to no end, calling them a flight attendant in a costume, 5-star microwavers, chef microwave, and a guy in a chef's hat. And yes, while these people certainly aren't Michelin star chefs, they do have to receive additional training above and beyond what's required for a normal flight attendant. Alright, with that topic hopefully cleared up, let's find seat 8 Kilo, a window seat in the last row of this 32-seat business class cabin. Waiting at the seat was a pillow, blanket, slippers, and a pair of headphones. As I settled in, the chef came over with the menus for today and said she'd return shortly to take my order.
Hello. I will come back in a few minutes to pick orders. Thank you.
Then the beverage tray showed up, which on Turkish is just a selection of juices, so no alcohol.
Lemonade, raspberry, fresh fruit juice, or what's it?
I'll just do the raspberry.
Sure. Enjoy.
Like I said, this is raspberry juice, but there's a strawberry floating in there. So maybe it's just to add a little bit of extra dimension to it. Either way, it tastes amazing.
As we waited for the remaining passengers to board, I checked out some of the seat features, including this large tray table, the various lights and vents, the storage areas, and the seat controls. In contrast to the seat we had on the outbound leg, this one doesn't have a door, but it's still fairly private given the shell up at eye level.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and dear children. As a Airlines member, we would like to welcome you on Turkish Airlines flight. My name is the cabin chief for your to help you on jet flight with shipless flight.
Dear passengers, please do not block the aisle when stowing your hand luggage in the overhead bins. Thank you for your cooperation.
After what seemed like a pretty incessant barrage of announcements, it was finally time to get going.
Alright, boarding door has been closed. It's 2:20, so hopefully that means we'll get a little bit of a head start here.
The safety video began and we pushed back, commencing our roughly 10-minute taxi to runway 35 left. The 35s are the longest runways at IST, stretching 4,100 meters or about 13,500 feet. Flight time today would be a pretty brutal 12 hours and 40 minutes at successively higher cruising altitudes as we burn off fuel. We'll ultimately end up at 40,000 feet as we pass over the Hudson Bay. As soon as we got to 10,000 feet, the crew sprang into action, first coming by with hot towels. Turkish actually offers a dine-on-demand service for these long daytime flights, so I could theoretically eat whenever I wanted. But I figured I'd just eat with everyone else at the beginning of the flight, since that's when they'd have all the trolleys set up. Today's first trolley would feature a selection of 9 different appetizers, which we shall see in a moment. But first, I put in an order for the Tatanjay champagne. That was delivered with a generous serving of room temperature nuts, followed by the canapes, aka the appetizer to the appetizer. While those went down the hatch, I popped on a movie, which was so bad I forgot the name, but those are great quality headphones. The place settings on Turkish are pretty elaborate. It's certainly not just silverware and a napkin. You also get a fake candle, oil, butter, spices, salt and pepper, and a little bowl to hold your bread. And not just any bread, but the oldest bread on Earth. And I gotta say, as cute as this little thing is, I was a little confused by the branding of it. I usually associate the term old bread with stale bread, aka not very appetizing. But clearly this is not old bread. It's fresh baked using an old recipe. So I think they might be better off calling it an ancient grains bread or something like that. What do you guys think? Because I could be in the minority here. Anyways, the only problem with being in the last row is that you're the last one to get your food. After what seemed like an eternity, the trolley finally pulled up and I went with a sampler of pretty much everything. The presentation was on point and everything tasted as good as it looked. I know some people who avoid seafood on planes, and I'm sure some of you guys do too. And I mean no disrespect, but I've had some of the best seafood in my life above 30,000 feet, notably the salmon tartare, which practically dissolved onto my tongue. Coming off those appetizers, my taste buds were completely maxed out, so the swordfish entree tasted relatively plain in comparison. But I certainly wasn't complaining, as it was a sizable portion and probably moderately healthier than the lamb chops and or pasta dishes.
Alright, main course has been cleared. Pretty solid main course. And at this point we've got 10 hours and 25 minutes to go. It's 8:12 a.m. in Denver. We land there around 6:30. Just waiting on the dessert service, arguably the best part of the meal.
Dessert is also quite the operation on Turkish. Over the past hour or so, the crew has reconfigured the trolley, so it now carries fruit, cheese, ice cream, pastries, and more. I think they ran out of a couple options en route to 8 kilo, so I just went for whatever they had left. And that was certainly more than enough. The highlight was the baklava, of course, which went particularly well with the peach ice cream. Sufficiently comatose by this point, I had to get up and move my body to avoid passing out. It was good timing, as the crew was coming around anyways to install the seat covers, as most people were planning on getting some shut-eye. As part of the process, the windows were also closed, which is no bueno for fighting jet lag, especially given it's daytime in both Istanbul and Denver at this point. But democracy rules, and the majority of the cabin did seem to knock out for a while.
They're closing all the blinds, which is a little bit annoying for a daytime flight, but gotta let people sleep because I think that's what a lot of people are gonna do.
As the workday was just beginning back in the US, I was gonna try to stay up. But first we had to check out the lavatory situation. The one I visited, directly behind my seat, was one of the larger accessible ones, and in addition to being spacious, it was also immaculate.
Got the nice black finishing here, plenty of scents, soap, lotion, perfume, toilet, plenty of space in this one. Like 2 squats in here. Look at that. No trash on the ground or anything. Stocked with toilet paper. Anything in here. Tissue paper. It's like either now or at some point this may have had a bidet function. I'm not about to try that in a plane. That would absolutely gross me out.
Upon arrival back at 8 kilo, I was still feeling rather lethargic and unmotivated, so I ordered an espresso, which was delivered promptly. And this is one of the cuter coffee presentations I've seen on a plane. The cup itself is actually 2 pieces, and the holder part is a very premium feeling copper piece, featuring none other than the Turkish Airlines Goose. Wi-Fi was available on this flight, and business class passengers get 1 gigabyte free. After that's exhausted, you can purchase packages ranging from $5 for basic messaging all the way up to $35 for unlimited browsing. The speeds were mediocre, but it did work for probably 90% of the flight, which helped me avoid a panic attack upon landing and refreshing my inbox. A little over halfway into the flight, the crew came around with a basket of snacks.
We just passed over like Iqaluit, I think, so like northern Canada. Want to be pretty quiet because everyone's sleeping, but the snack basket came by. Got some chocolate, chia cracker, and a fig, dried fig. Love it.
And for the record, I was definitely still full at this point, so I just stashed everything away in my bag for later. After I'd maxed out my work capacity, it was time to test out the bed mode. These seats, of course, recline to 180 degrees and are advertised at 76 inches long. And sure enough, I didn't feel too restricted lengthwise, but the footwell does taper to make room for the seat in front, so your feet don't have complete lateral freedom. That's potentially one of the only upsides of Turkish's old business class seats on the 777 and A330. You have more of an ottoman than a footwell, so it's easier to move around when the seat is flat. One thing I did notice is that there's a bit of an awkward gap between the seat and the fuselage. The comfort level overall was solid, not too firm and not too soft, and I think this would be a fairly nice spot to get some shut-eye. But not on this flight, so back up we go. I spent some time screwing around with the IFE, which supposedly has enough content to last you 21 flights around the globe, and pretty soon it was time for meal number 2. Like meal number 1, it began with a hot towel, but this time we had the sunrise mood lighting going, presumably to ease people out of their slumber. Meal number 2 was also a multi-course affair, which I suppose should be expected on a 12-hour flight, but sadly isn't very common these days. The starter was smoked salmon with a nice dollop of creme fraiche on top. And then also on the first tray we had a zucchini salad and the dessert, which was a semolina cake. The fish was just as buttery and flavorful as round 1 earlier in the flight, and it didn't last long. For the main, I went with the chicken salad, which was practically drowning in a sea of lebne, which is basically a yogurt cheese. So it was really heavy, but also really good. Also, props to Turkish on the presentation of this thing. It looks like a work of art. Drink-wise, I went with the relaxing tea, which was advertised as anti-jet lag. And I gotta say, even though it basically put me right to sleep, I felt amazing when I woke up the following day in Denver. Post meal number 2, we were finally over the United States. Finally over the US here. Like an hour and a half out from Denver. Pretty soon, we vacated our cruising altitude of 40,000 feet and began our approach into DIA. We were instructed to enter a right downwind for runway 35 right.
Dear passengers, as we are descending, make sure that your hand luggage is stowed in the overhead bins or under the seat in front of you. If available, your personal screen and handset must be stowed properly, and read your safety card in your seat pocket carefully. Thank you. Gentlemen and dear children, we hope that you had a pleasant flight. For your safety, please remain seated with your seatbelt fastened until the seatbelt sign has been turned off, and do not open the overhead bins. You may use your electronic devices. Thank you for flying with Turkish Airlines, a member of Star Alliance. We would like to say goodbye and hope to meet you again.
So, while we're enjoying the spectacular sunset views en route to the A gates, let's hit a quick recap of the Turkish experience. Was it worth it this time around? Well, for context, let's start with the cost of the ticket, which was 88,000 ANA miles round trip, plus $473. These days, it can be tough to find one-way business class tickets for that price, so it felt like a steal, especially for 2 12-hour flights on a well-respected global carrier. Now, Turkish talks a big game when it comes to their premium products, so I want to hold them to high standards. The ground experience at Istanbul airport is very good, and the TK Lounge has some of the best food you'll find in an airport anywhere. However, it's not a very exclusive feeling lounge, and it was almost indistinguishable from the main terminal with respect to noise levels and crowds. The service was pretty solid across the board, from the ground staff to the cabin crew to the 2 dudes manning the golf simulator in the lounge. Though the crew's English wasn't perfect, I had no issues understanding them, and it was more than enough to perform all the necessary duties and deliver a positive experience. Most of the in-flight announcements were delivered via a very robotic-sounding female AI voice, which I suppose helps increase the likelihood that non-Turkish speakers will understand, but it does make the experience feel a little more cold and corporate. We did get a welcome message from our cabin chief, but the farewell message was pre-recorded, which I thought was a little bit odd. The seat, while not as good as the X-Aeroflot product, is perfectly acceptable. It does suffer from a lack of storage options, but that's something I'd gladly give up in the name of privacy, at least relative to the old Turkish seats. In general though, I found the Turkish people to be incredibly kind and the country was breathtakingly beautiful. I won't hesitate to fly Turkish again if the price is right, but I also would love to try Pegasus, Corendon, and or A-Jet. If you guys have any recommendations there, definitely let me know. But for now, it's time to get off this plane and get to sleep. So thank you very much for joining me today, and I wish you the safest and happiest of travels wherever your journeys may take you. So long from Denver.
Teşekkür ederim. Thank you so much. Thanks so much. Bye bye.